You're listening to TJ's One of Us for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANYPodcast. You can also find us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, danced a jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky souls still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello, welcome to another episode of TJ's One of Us here at the Always Next Year Podcast Studios. This is a somber one for us tonight. We have a full house, but this is a reactionary piece to the 76ers Game 7 loss to the now Eastern Conference Finals bound Toronto Raptors. I do have with me Rob, Connor, and Kevin. Rob, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm still recovering. I'm still putting the pieces back together after having my heart ripped out by Kawhi Leonard last night.
I feel that. I feel every bit of that, and I feel like we all do. Connor, how are you, sir?
Same thing. I'm feeling the same way.
And Kev, how about yourself, man? You're the most positive Sixers fan we got. How are you taking the loss?
Kind of like how the last season of Game of Thrones is. I'm disappointed, but not surprised.
Okay. Well, you're talking to at least two people who I know who do not watch Game of Thrones, but I've been on Twitter and don't live under a rock, so I understand that. But fellas, Kawhi's shot is on its 4,637th bounce on the rim right now, and I'm still not convinced that it's dropped. What a sick way to end this season. And if you look at the series as a whole, the things that the 76ers did well, the things that they didn't, the way that first quarter in particular went, it almost seemed as though if they were going to lose this game, it was going to be in some sort of heartbreak fashion similar to that. And Kawhi, he proved, you're a top one or two player, on the planet right now. And, only a handful of guys make that shot. And he's one of them. And he was one shot better than the 76ers this year. And it's tough to swallow. We're going to start with you, Rob. I kind of want to go through real quick and just take a minute if we could each kind of run through. We all watched the game separately, but if you were watching it with people, let's hear the mood of the room, and how you personally reacted to that final shot. And like I said, Rob, we'll start with you.
I was watching by myself. I was up in my room. Throughout the course of the game, I felt generally pretty confident, especially when they had a 5-point lead. I think it was like 67-62 at some point late in the third quarter. And then they had the lead again in the fourth quarter, and I was feeling good about it. And then all of a sudden, Toronto's up by 4 points with about a minute left. I'm not feeling so good. Sixers obviously benefit from Kawhi missing a foul shot, and Butler gets the layup to tie the game. At that point, I still had a bad feeling, though, because 4 seconds left, that's a lot of time for Kawhi Leonard to do something. That's exactly what he did. And Grant, he got an extremely lucky roll on that rim there, but I was completely heartbroken. It was just like when Patrick Kane scored that goal in 2010. I just sat there on my couch in complete disbelief that ball went in the net.
Sounds pretty similar to my mood and reaction. Connor, what was it like for you watching that game up in Canada, and were you with any of your Toronto Raptors friends?
I was not with any of them. I was actually in my bed with my girlfriend passed out beside me. So,
did she remain passed out, or did your reaction wake her?
My hands were up in the air, and then they were just behind my head. That was all I did. I just sat back. I couldn't believe it. I was just shocked. I know that I had 2 or 3 of my good friends who are Raptors fans texting me the entire game, and that game was tough to watch. As much as we want to blame the refs, and as much as we want to say that the refs are to blame, I mean, yeah, they missed a travel that everyone's bringing up today by Kawhi, but almost every pass and play that happens and the refs don't call it. It is what it is. I mean, I contrary to what Rob felt, I at no point felt that confident in what the Sixers were doing. And I felt even less confident when they came up as a professional NBA basketball team with less than 5 minutes to go and came up with 3 completely empty possessions. That's where I was like, there's no way we're taking this. And then, of course, they give you that glimmer of hope, and then Kawhi just rips it away. And my dad texted today, and he's not a huge basketball fan, but he said we're going to be seeing that Kawhi shot every time the playoffs come around for the next 50 years. And that's exactly how I feel. I think we're going to see that shot in every highlight reel for up until the 2050 NBA playoffs.
I don't disagree. You know, moments like that, Game 7s in the NBA, Game 7s in the NHL, those moments do live forever. And it feels like the emotions of those Game 7s, the games are always close. Even blowouts, you know, you still feel every second of that game. And when a moment like Kawhi's happens, you're right. You know, your dad's right. That is a shot that is going to be, you know, synonymous with NBA playoff greatness, and quite possibly the greatest playoff series by one player ever recorded in an NBA series to date. You know, and people can challenge and argue that with different LeBron series, with different Michael Jordan series, different Kobe or Shaq series, and you know, different Magic series. Like, the names can go on, but for us and for our lifetime and for this era of basketball, that's going to be synonymous for forever. Kev, again, one of the most positive Sixers fans I know, man. You know, you said that you weren't overly surprised by the result. How was the mood like for you, and were you watching the game with anyone?
I was watching the game by myself in my room, and when Game of Thrones started at 9, I switched over to that, but I put the game on my phone, so I had like a 5-second delay. So the whole world knew before me, at least 5 seconds. But it's weird. It's hard for me to explain. It's almost like it was set up that way. Like life, like destiny just set it up that way. And like, I'm one of those people that believes that like everything happens for a reason. So like, I literally was sitting in my room and I just was like, 4 seconds left. I guarantee you they're going to give the ball and he's going to hit a game winner. And I just said that to myself. And I was like, they're going to give it to Kawhi. He's on fire. I'm not surprised if he makes this. And then, you know, we all saw the shot. He faded away from 3-point, like from all the way over in the corner with Joel Embiid in his face. And I'm like, no way is that going in. And, you know, he shoots that shot 1,000 times, 999 times he'll miss it. But the one time he makes it is going to be the one time that matters, and it's going to be against us. So, great. You know, it was one of those days I didn't want to talk about the game with anyone, to be honest with you. I stayed away from ESPN, stayed away from SportsCenter, stayed away from almost everything because I didn't want to see it, because it was all on everywhere. You know, it was the shot heard around the world. So, but yeah, but you know, I think just being already a disappointed Philly fan, I'm so used to it. You know what I mean? All these years of disappointment. It's just, it doesn't hit me as hard as it used to. So I'm kind of just like, I'll be over it tomorrow, and then I'll just be looking forward to next season.
You know, it's hard to escape from, because it seems like every time I check my phone today, I get a Bleacher Report notification. Like, here's the 7,000th different angle of Kawhi Leonard's game winner. Like, Jesus Christ, I can't get away from it. It's all over Twitter. It's all over Facebook. It's the first recommended video on YouTube. I'm like, it's going to be sticking with us for a while.
I think I had it worse than you guys, because I was at the office for work today, and every time I was on the phone with one of my coworkers, my other coworker was also working at the office with me, is a huge Raptors fan, and he'd just roll over in his desk chair and flip a gif of the shot to me, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, again, a shot like that in a moment like that, at a stage like that, with a player like that, and he is such a controversial player, because it still feels, even after that shot, even if they go in and they sweep Milwaukee, which they certainly will not do, but even if they did, and even if they go ahead and they win the NBA championship, Kawhi Leonard probably is not staying in Toronto. He's such a polarizing athlete, and he's something that's so not understood and so not grasped, and certainly not grasped by the Philadelphia Philadelphia 76ers fans. We expect raw emotion. We respect people like Joel Embiid, who cries on his way into the tunnel, and Tobias Harris, who you could just see his soul leave his body when he saw that fifth bounce on the rim, which inevitably put that basketball through the hoop. It just looked like someone shot him. And like he knew that was the moment that quite possibly could be the last time he's leaving the court in a 76ers uniform. Jimmy Butler was the ultimate professional throughout his time here. He was the exact opposite of what we believed. And all of this happens, and it happens at the hands of a guy that we don't understand. We call him a machine, this robot, this lifeless being, and even throughout that, he had a moment of happiness, a moment. And then in his interview, you would have expected that he never played an NBA game. He was just some guy. And it's so hard to connect with. But we still, just as Rob has said, just as Kevin, you stated that you stayed away from ESPN and from Twitter and things like that, this is forever going to be synonymous with what this very, very special 76ers team did this year. That's going to be something that's incredibly difficult to live with. And Rob, you said it best. This is going to be something that is going to remind us of, the moments of the Patrick Kane goal, sliding through Leighton's pad there, that those moments are things that take away from, something truly special that occurred within our organization with the Philadelphia 76ers, because this team was very special and has the opportunity to be very special. Before we get into some of the games, that I will tell you guys, a little bit of what it was like for me listening or watching this game. I want to keep this away from off-season transactions. I want to keep this away from whether or not Jimmy Butler's going to return or what the status of Brett Brown is. Let's give this team and give this Game 7 the respect that it deserves, and we'll keep it wholeheartedly just on the Game 7 and just our reactions and responses throughout that game. But for me, I was watching the game at home. Stephanie, who is obviously she's a big sports person, but basketball is probably fourth on her list. But I'm downstairs and I'm watching the game with her, and she's ordinarily 8:45, 9 o'clock, and she's upstairs and ready to go to bed. And she's certainly not staying up for a basketball game, and she couldn't leave. She could not leave the couch, and that was how it was for me. 76ers basketball, and you guys have watched games with me. You've watched Eagles games with me. Connor, you haven't had the pleasure, so you won't necessarily be able to relate to it. But I watch these games very emotionally. And I am vocal, and I'd like to sit there and think that I am every Philadelphia sports fan, when I watch our teams play. And many a time throughout that game last night, I'm screaming, at whether it be just a poor shot selection or the empty possessions, Connor, that you spoke about, the 3 in a row. The fact that Serge Ibaka finally starts hitting 3-point shots, which is amazing to me. Or Marc Gasol hits that dagger of a 3-point shot late in the third or late in the fourth quarter. I don't recall which one. But I was emotional and I was loud, and I assumed, as in recent history with Stephanie, that she would go upstairs, and she couldn't. This game just drew you in too much. And because as badly as some of the results in this game had gone, you just felt like neither team was ever out of it. Even when Toronto went up 5-6 points with 2-3 minutes left, I still felt like there was still a shot that the 76ers, as poorly as they shot, as badly as they have executed down the stretch, they can win this basketball game. And that's very clearly what someone who doesn't live and die by the 76ers in the way that I do, how they felt. And that to me shows how special this group and this team was. So, again, watching this game with so much emotion. And when Jimmy Butler goes ahead and steals that ball and goes coast to coast and lays it in there with 4 seconds left, you notice that Jimmy Butler doesn't celebrate. He understands there is one more possession left for them to get themselves to overtime and to give themselves 5 more minutes of a chance to be the best team in this series and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. And you knew, I was explosive. I was electric. I jumped off the couch, and I was right back at that. I'm so glad that I picked the 76ers to win Game 6 and 7 in advance. I'm feeling good about this right now. We're going to go to overtime. I'm feeling good. Toronto inbounds the ball. We all know what happens from there. Now, when that ball leaves Kawhi's hand, I don't know what it was like for you guys, but the second that shot left his hand, I felt like slow motion in my brain, a flip book, just going through every single minute thing that occurred throughout that game. The minus 10 or minus 12 that Greg Monroe was in 97 seconds of basketball, the missed layup by Joel Embiid, the 3 empty possessions, all these things just flew into my brain. And before even seeing the trajectory of that ball coming down, I said, that's going in. And not unlike Rob, not unlike Connor's hands behind his head, not unlike the unsurprised Kevin, I just sat there and I said, well, you have to tip your cap. There are 2 players in the world that make that shot, and neither one of them make it. And I think, Kev, you were the one who had said 999 times out of 1,000 that doesn't go in. It just happened to be the time. You have to tip your cap. And I didn't react. I just sat there. And I think Steph was a little taken. She sat there and she said, I can't believe you're not screaming and yelling right now. And I didn't have it in me. That was that immediate just sadness. And just, again, we witnessed a really special team all year. And that to me was incredibly, incredibly difficult to sit there and cope with in the moment. I didn't even have the energy to want to break something, which is very, very unlike me. So I don't know what it was like for you guys in that what seemed like an eternity for that ball to come down and hit the rim 5 times and go through the hoop. But it was tough. And I did sit there and pick in my brain all the different things that didn't go well in this game 7. So let's start right in the beginning. 76ers, they come out and they look like the more energized team. They looked like they were the more aggressive team. It looked like they were, almost a little too amped up, so much so that every shot they had was heavy. They started 1 from 10 or 1 for 11, I think it was, and they scored 13 points in the first quarter. Ordinarily, you're not in the rest of that basketball game. So why don't you guys take us through what your mood was watching just that first quarter and the madness of the 22% shots made in that quarter. And both teams shot poorly. But we'll start in reverse order this time. We'll start with you, Kev. What was your mood like watching this first quarter? Was there frustration? What types of things did you notice? Kev, we lost you. Connor, we'll go to you.
I was kind of a little shocked by the play. I mean, I know that they did come out with some great effort. They did come out more energized. They did come out looking maybe the slightly better team, but not a whole lot better team. But I was like, the way that I thought about it, and when I was texting my buddies, was just like, this is really how this game 7 is going to go. And, well, little did we know what the rest would be like. But, I mean, at the time, I was like, you can't be serious that both these teams are going to go shooting 30%. They're going to turn the ball over. They're going to just be sloppy. And, I mean, overall, I didn't garner much confidence from that first quarter at all. It kind of made me even more nervous because of the sloppy play. And we've seen what that sloppy play has led to in other Sixers games. So that was more my reaction to that first quarter.
Yeah, so for you, it really set the tone for a mood, going forward in a confidence level. And I think that's fair. The TV broadcast had mentioned it was, whoever won that first quarter and whoever shot the basketball better in this series won those games. And it was as simple as that. And this game proved to be very similar.
Rob. I'm sorry, Shane. My phone was breaking up. The only thing I got from you from that what you were asking was you just said, Kev, I think we lost you, and I was like, wait, you were speaking to me? I didn't. Sorry, I completely. My phone, I guess, you were going in and out for a minute there, and I think I got the gist of what you said, but just ask again. I'm sorry.
No worries, sir. No worries. We were just talking about the tone of the first quarter. We spoke on how the Sixers came out the more energized team and maybe almost overly so, as they were pretty heavy with the basketball and their shots. And, they came out, shooting, like I said, I think they finished the first quarter less than 20% from the floor. And we're talking about the mood that you had going through that first 12 minutes of basketball.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it was basically like, here we go again with the what did they start off with? Missing like the first 6 shots or something.
I think he's 0 for 9.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said, here we go again, another slow game, another low scoring game, and then the fact that we're getting out rebounded and like the first 12 minutes of just it was almost since they were about like the same level as the Raptors, where I was just like, if all they had to do was make their shots, they probably would be in the lead right now, maybe even more. But what was it? 0-6 for a while. They didn't score for a while, like the first couple minutes in. But after they set the tone like that, I immediately was just like, so it's going to be this kind of game. And then I just, I wasn't as hyped as I usually am. But that came at the end of the game. But yeah, that made my anxiety worse. Just the fact that they, the fact that they came out like that. And I just was like, are you kidding me? And the fact Joel Embiid's shooting jump shots and not going to the rim. And I'm like, all right, I guess we're watching a regular season game during the playoffs. And they, thankfully they improved a little bit down the game. But, we all watched it. We all saw.
Rob, I think you were actually also managing the Twitter account during the game. So I think that we got a lot of your live reaction responses.
I wasn't on I wasn't on Twitter. I was on my own Twitter a little bit. But
that was me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Kev. So Rob, why don't you give us a count of your first 12 minutes of this basketball game and how it kind of set your emotional tone?
The first 12 minutes, I mean, obviously I wasn't happy with how things were going offensively, how they're putting a little bit too much into their shots. Everything it seemed like was rattling in and out, coincidentally at the same end where Kawhi Leonard's shot rattled in. 0 for 9, not a good look, not a great way to start a Game 7. Fortunately for them, Toronto wasn't hitting their shots either. So I think Toronto started off with the first 6 points, and then the Sixers went on like a 7-0 run after that and took the lead. It was a little bit back and forth. Neither team really played that well in the first quarter. So when the Sixers were behind, I mean, just given the fact that neither team was playing well, I wasn't feeling terrible about it. I still had a pretty decent amount of hope. And then, after that, the way the game kind of went back and forth, I thought that the Sixers had him right where they wanted him, so Jimmy Butler could do his thing in the fourth quarter. And he did, but then again, so did Kawhi. But the first quarter, I wasn't happy with it, but I wasn't overly disappointed with it at the same time. I thought they could have executed so much better offensively, though, and if they did, then they would have won the ball game.
Yeah, and I wanted to focus here on the first quarter, and then we'll kind of talk about the rest of the game in bulk, and we'll lead obviously up to the Kawhi shot at the end. But the first quarter for me, I felt strangely encouraged, despite the fact that they offensively nothing worked, But to me, Rob, and you alluded to it, Toronto also was not knocking down shots. And that was in large part due to the fact that the 76ers played really, really good defense that entire game. I know people want to sit there and say, that they didn't, and Kawhi scored 40 or whatever, 41 points, but even Kawhi had to take 39 shots to get that, plus his free throw attempts, that to me, you made this guy work, you made this team work, and you made someone other than Kawhi have to score, which is why this game was so low scoring. A Game 7 that goes down to the wire like that, and for a final score to be 92-90, that to me was, our defense was near suffocating, and it was that way in the first as well. We forced them into difficult shots. We forced their shooters who did not want to shoot in this series to shoot. And they were hesitant, and we forced Kawhi to pick up his dribble. Kawhi early on, and again, we know this with Kawhi, nothing about him lasts. None of his negatives, anyway, last. He was short on everything throughout the early portions of this game. And offensively, we could not capitalize on that. And a big part, and I don't remember if it was Connor or if it was Kev, but one of you had mentioned, sorry, I lost my train of thought. We're getting alerts here through our accounts. But regardless, we're going to skip that part because now I'm all out of whack. But the first quarter for me, again, strangely encouraged, because for as much as we felt like we were out of it, we were down 5 points at the end of one. We only allowed 18 points. Our defense, again, suffocatingly good. We forced Kawhi into difficult shots. We forced him to pick up his dribble. All those things occurred, and that was kind of a pattern that set throughout the game. When you take a look at it, even Kawhi for them, he was a -2 on this night. Scoring all those points, being on the floor for 44 minutes or whatever he was on the court for, he was a -2. It came down to the bench, and it came down to we have 3 players on the bench that we can play. 3, really 2.5, and they were terrible tonight or last night during this game. Toronto just happened to have a little bit more on their bench this week, and that carried throughout the rest of this game. But some tones, that kind of set in that first quarter. Offensive rebounding. 76ers were once again terrible on the glass. It's whether it's a lack of effort, whether it's poor positioning, you can blame it on a multitude of different things. But when you give 16 second chance opportunities on 16 offensive rebounds to a team like Toronto, and most of their threes came on second chance opportunities, that's difficult. I don't know if you guys know, I don't know what the exact number was, but I think it was 23 or 26 more shots that Toronto took in this game than the 76ers. So that comes at the hands of, we had 5
I thought it
more.
was like 30.
It might have been.
It's somewhere in that ballpark. I'll pull it up right now.
Yeah, you can pull up the number. We had 5 more turnovers, and we allowed 16 offensive rebounds. That's 21 possessions. Right there. Not including, well, whatever. But like I said, it's 16 offensive boards, and and the 5 more turnovers there.
Yeah,
to only lose that game. Go ahead.
They had 24 more they had 89 shot attempts, and we had 65. We shot 43%. They shot 38, and they still beat us. And we shot better. We shot 33% from 3-point land. They shot 23%. And we had more free throws made than they did.
If you looked at all those numbers, you would look at and say that the 76ers, outside of overall shots attempt, that they should not have been in that game. That was kind of the tone throughout this game, that some of those mistakes that we saw plague us in Brooklyn series, that made that series tighter at times than it needed to be, and certainly game 1 there, and that made this entire Toronto series more interesting than it needed to be. That's hard to live with, and those are things that I kind of roll back to, and I say 10, 12 games in the regular season that our starting 5, our true starting 5, play together. And how many of those games were meaningful with intensity there? Not many. Those guys all had to play 40 plus minutes last night together for their 20th game on the basketball court in the biggest of stages. That's hard. Not everyone talks and has that nonverbal communication to pick up on things such as rebounds. Who's crashing a board in, who's boxing out, who's taking the mid-range arc there. There's so many different nonverbal communications that they haven't had the extensive playing time together to figure out. That's a problem. Joel Embiid obviously being sick. That was an issue throughout this, sick or hurt throughout this series, and even last. Him not at 100%. I think if Joe's even 50%, we probably win the series in 5 or 6 games. I'm that confident in that. I do still think that the 76ers are a better overall basketball team than what Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors are. But taking a look at a multitude of different factors here and things that have happened, starting in that first quarter where they put up 13 points, shot awful, turned the basketball over, and they just didn't click. It carried throughout the rest of the game. What was it for each of you guys that kind of, set the tone as, again, we'll revisit it as, picture in your head that shot's up in the air. If you're blaming something most on why the 76ers did not win this series, what are you blaming it on? Rob, we're going to start with you this time.
For not winning the series, I'm blaming it on failing to hold a lead and coming up short in game 4. I mean, they had a fantastic shot at going into the driver's seat, up 3-1, pulling out a big win on the home court. They fell apart in the fourth quarter of that game. They couldn't hold that lead. And you go from being up 3-1 to going back to Toronto at 2-2, and then Toronto, of course, blew us out in Game 5. So, I mean, if the Sixers win that Game 4, then they clinch the series in Game 6. And that is, to me, that's the biggest turning point in why the Sixers lost this series, because they couldn't get the job done in Game 4 when they had it right in front of them.
I respect that as well, and I think that that's something that this young roster will go back to, and it is something that will undoubtedly make them sick this off season to sit there and know that, a 30-second swing there in Game 4 and a 60-second swing really, dictated how much harder they had to play in games 5, 6, and 7 when it should have never been that way. Instead of potentially even resting Joel Embiid in that Game 5, had we won Game 4 being up 3-1, now he had to play 45 minutes last night in a Game 7. You're oft injured, ill, not 100% superstar center, had to play 45 minutes in an elimination game. That doesn't happen if you win Game 4. So, Rob, that's a good response. Connor, what was it for you that if you took a look back, on Game 7 and some of the things that occurred there, what to you was the most glaring stat or the most glaring problem as to why the 76ers did not come out on top in Game 7?
The big thing there for me was rebounds, because I think in almost every other game we have rebounded them except for Game 7. And even I think if 3 or 4 rebounds go the other way or we hustle for those boards, I think that game we very well could have easily won by 4 or 6 points. I mean, I do understand where you're coming with the nonverbal cues and understanding each other, but you look when the Raptors would shoot and that rebound would come out, there was no verbal, nonverbal, nobody moved. There was no movement. The way Embiid just watched every board, you're 7'2" standing under that rim, and you're letting those offensive boards get away every single time. And I also think that when healthy, just the use of Joel Embiid has just made me scratch my head the entire series, because it just seems like they never got to use him correctly. He was always standing at the point, and I don't know if it was that he didn't want to back down Gasol, because Gasol was a big man that finally pushed back and gave him a tough battle under the rim. But standing out there and having 5 guys line that arc and nobody trying to get into the paint, it was painful to watch, because even Simmons, it's like, why he took 5 shots in Game 7. Why are you not going to the hoop? Why are you not being the Simmons that we got so excited to see driving the lane and bullying people and going right in? Like that's what we needed. We needed Embiid in the paint. We needed Simmons who would drive the lane. We needed people to do what we praised them for doing all year, but they didn't. It's like they all forgot what their role was with the team, and that was the biggest thing for me, especially just watching the amount of times I watched 5 guys stand around that arc and just pass the ball and set picks and just everybody running into each other. I think you really that's just a sign of I need to adjust the game plan and a need for people to better understand their role in that type of situation.
Yeah, I struggled with the usage of Joel Embiid as well on the offensive side, and where I praise Brett Brown for his ability to maximize the strengths of 2 very ball dominant players in Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler. The 76ers were able to play with 2 different offensive identities depending on who was bringing that basketball up the court, and even 3 if you want to throw in Tobias Harris, who also saw some time with the basketball. I felt like he gave a little bit too much trust and leeway to Joel Embiid to be able to just be great, regardless of his positioning on the floor, regardless of his role, because he was one of the best players, one of the 2 best players in the series, even sick. So that is certainly a concern. Kev, for you, one thing in Game 7 that occurs that you kind of sit there and say, had this gone a different way, the 76ers would probably be representing the Eastern, or would be going to the Eastern Conference Finals?
I would say the defense. Oh my God. Half the time, this whole series, but mainly the last 2 games, maybe even 3 games. If you notice their defense, they gave so much room to Ibaka. Granted, he airballed a lot, but still, who cares? Even if you know they're not good at threes, still play on them. They were just like standing there letting Marc Gasol shoot a 3, let Kawhi Leonard shoot a 3, let every single player on that team have a wide open 3 majority of the time. And that's why they took 30 more shots than us, because they knew we weren't going to defend them the way they were defending us. Our defense, I didn't think was really good, minus the fact, like what Connor said about the rebounds, that pissed me off too. That clearly was a contributing factor in this game. But for the whole series, I would say majority of the time, if you watch the replay or watch it on their defense, they play zone too much. And like, I get what they're doing with that, but at the same time, it's like, dude, they're lazy. Obviously, it looks like they're lazy. They literally, Pascal Siakam's literally dribbling by the 3. We know he can make a 3-pointer. The only reason why he's not shooting that is because he's trying to get the other players involved in the game too. But Siakam had so many open 3s. Serge Ibaka hit two threes on us. The 1 3 was contested, but the other one, we just let him shoot it. Again, just, all right, I guess you can shoot that for free. Kawhi Leonard getting the rebound, giving it to him. We're just all standing by the rim being like, oh, he'll maybe miss it. And nope, he makes it. Same with Kyle Lowry. Oh, okay, cool. He's going to make a good 3 because it's wide open. Oh, my God. I think that's the most times I've yelled at the TV screen because of their lack of defense. And Joel is great on defense, but when the whole team is just like, dude, why are you just standing there? Why are you not getting rebounds? Why are you letting the players shoot a wide open shot? That is what annoyed me. When the Raptors, when you watch them play defense, they didn't give JJ one open look. His only open look would be if he got a good screen. Same with the rest of them. They couldn't get a good look because they were fighting for each basket. And Toby did a good job keeping us up there. You know, he was hitting some wide open 3s, which was good. But the Raptors, I think, played way better defense than us. And we're the better team. We are the better team. But I guess the Raptors just, you know, they came in there being like, even though we know we got home court advantage, we still have to take it to them. And they did. And I mean, granted, we came down to game 7. It came down to the last shot of the whole entire series to put it away, but we never should have been in that position in the first place.
I think on the list of things to blame, the defense is so far down on the bottom. You know, for me, I don't find that same anger or frustration in their defensive approach in this series. I think that they did what they needed to do in order to, you know, make Kawhi beat you. You know, they were going to let or make the other people beat you. You know, they've chose to double Kawhi. You know, they chose to stick either Ben or Jimmy on him almost exclusively. You know, and I felt like despite the fact that Kawhi had that type of a series, damn it, they made him work. You know, it was very clear that was their game plan to do that. They were going to live with Pascal Siakam or Serge Ibaka. You know, or shit, there's a couple other players there that were shooting up 3s, and I'm blanking on Marc Gasol even taking a couple. You know, those guys don't want to shoot the basketball. That's not what they want to do, not from 3 anyway. And we knew that, and we saw the hesitancy in their shot, and it wasn't because they wanted to get people involved. It was, you know, it was because they did not trust their shot as much as they trusted Kawhi Leonard to shoot and score. For me, the biggest thing, and I have to go back to what Rob said, you know, every single possession matters in the postseason. And you can take a look at the 3, well, Connor mentioned the 3 back-to-back empty possessions, essentially shot clock violation possessions. They weren't all that, but they were essentially empty possessions. That's frustrating. But if you take a look at things like that, not capitalizing when you need to capitalize. Kawhi Leonard may play 3 minutes a night of not great basketball, and he may sit another 3 minutes. If you don't maximize those 6 minutes on the court, you probably aren't going to beat that team. And it just seemed like night in and night out, the 76ers just failed to do that outside of their 2 blowout wins. And for me, just like for Rob, it goes back to that game 4. You know, you had a lead, you had a late lead, and you had every opportunity to sit there and put yourself in a position to force and I'm not saying Toronto's a bad basketball team by any means. I feel like, us and us, Toronto and Milwaukee are fairly evenly matched, but you would have had to make that team beat you 3 straight times in the playoffs. I don't think that even Kawhi Leonard gets that done. Not against the 76ers team. And that happens because of the failure to win in Game 4. And that to me makes every possession beyond that game that much more pivotal and important. And it just seemed like the moments that they needed a stop, or the moments that they needed to be secure with the basketball and take good shots, or work the ball down low and actually get into the paint, they just failed to be able to do it. And that's tough.
I'll tell you what, man, they only allowed 92 points. I mean, if you allow 92 points, you should win that basketball game. So that Game 7 is not about the defense did what they were supposed to. I mean, granted, Kawhi went off against them, but they did what they were supposed to.
It took 39 shots to do it.
Yeah, they held them to 92 points. You got to win that basketball game. That's all about poor execution offensively and also the defensive rebounding.
I agree. I mean, you look at it, they took almost as many shots as they scored points in the game. The fact that happens, I mean, I bet there's very few NBA basketball games where you can look back and say, holy shit, that team took 89 shots and scored 92 points. Like, that's crazy. That just goes back to us poorly executing. I don't think you can put that on our defense. That's just goes back to our offense and the poor execution, and just how 2 or 3 possessions could have easily swung the entire game in our favor. I mean, look back in time, I bet you'd have a hard-pressed time finding that type of stat.
Joel Embiid shot 33%. He was 6 of 18. If he makes 1 more of those shots, we're going to overtime. If he makes 2 more of those shots, we win that game.
And down the stretch, Jimmy Butler missed a free throw that he doesn't normally miss. Joel Embiid missed a layup inside after an attempted Euro step move. And Ennis also missed a free throw. If those things happen, you won the game. You're not going to overtime. It doesn't matter what happened. You won the basketball game. And that all happened under 2 minutes. So there are certainly, like I said, there are a multitude of different things that you could pinpoint it on. And as I started this segment with, for me, when that ball was hanging in the air forever, those are the things that went through my mind. It was the Ennis and Butler missed free throws. It was the missed layup by Joel Embiid. It was the 3 empty possessions. It was the 16-5 on offensive rebounds. It was the 15-10 in the turnover ratio in Toronto's favor. It was the fact that Greg Monroe was like a minus 10 or 12 in 90 seconds of basketball. So many different things went through my head before that ball hit the rim for the 5th time. And again, you sit there in silence and you just say, did that really just freaking happen? And now, just as Connor started us off in this segment with as well, this is a highlight that is going to be in every single NBA ad, especially towards postseason time, for the next several decades, because that was the kind of moment that Kawhi Leonard executed. And that's a tough thing to live with if you're a 76ers fan and you're looking at year 2 of Simmons, year 3 of Embiid, and a hopeful offseason where we can return some pieces that we really, we really sold for. But I want to take us through 2 more things before we get off this segment. One, I want to get each person's take on the defense for the last 4.1 seconds of that game. There's been a lot. I've been in some conversations on Twitter myself and with other people, just via text and phone call throughout the day today. I am a Ben Simmons apologist, and I felt like the defense as a whole on that possession executed about as good as you possibly can. And not unlike Kevin said earlier, maybe 1 time out of 1,000 that shot goes in. It just happened to be that 1 time. I was okay with the way that they played that possession. To me, it wasn't a breakdown. But I want to get your guys' take on that final possession. And then after that, I just want to give each of us just a couple minutes just to sit here and just kind of give an evaluation of the 76ers season as a whole. But Kev, we'll start with you, man. That last 4 minutes or 4 seconds of basketball on the inbound pass to Kawhi Leonard. You criticized the defense last night and throughout the series. I'm curious to see how comfortable you were with the way that final possession was played for Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and the 76ers.
They played that defense there. They actually that was good defense. What more can you do? Joel was right in his face. There's nothing more you can do. He literally just threw. It was luck. The only reason he made that shot was because of luck. I hate to say that wasn't a skill shot. That wasn't a shot you just shoot. You regularly make. You don't make that shot regularly. I guarantee you, if he shot that shot 50 times, he would have missed 49 out of it. And the one time he would, it would be against us. But I mean, I thought that it was that play, that very last play, 4.1 seconds, is just literally drew it up as the basketball gods drew it up, and it just happened to go on the side of the Raptors. The way he shot that, and it just, there's nothing more I can say. Defense was fine on that play. The offense for the Raptors, it just happened to click for them. They didn't throw the ball away like what we did last year when we had multiple last possessions and just threw it away. But
gotta love JJ last year.
Yeah, that was, I remember that. That was bad. But, yeah, it's disappointing, like I said, but there was literally nothing more we could do. We could have had Ben and Joel probably on him, and he still would have made the same arcing shot to make that, for the game winner. So, we did the best we could.
Connor, for you, you said that your hands were in the air, and as that shot clanked off the rim, 4,000 times, your hand slowly made its way behind your head, and you looked in disbelief and awe. 4.1 seconds left in that game. Were you comfortable with that final defensive stand and attempted stand by the Philadelphia 76ers despite the result?
You know what? After everything that we saw in Game 7, I thought that was the best defense they played the whole game. That was the best they were set up the whole game on defense and offense. And I think that they did the very best they could. I don't think there was a breakdown by Simmons. I think Embiid probably made some sort of motion or communication just to say, I got this. And he took him. And, you look at every angle picture of this, and I've seen, probably, I didn't know you could get that many angles of pictures of a shot, but there is. And I saw them, and Embiid's right there. You could have put anyone on that floor on him, and they all would have probably had their hands. When that switch happened, all the hands would have been the same way. If Jimmy was on him, if Tobias was on him, probably not if Redick because he's shorter, but I mean, any switcher would have happened. I think you would have ended up. It just so happens that I prefer to have Embiid's hands there, and just like Kev said, it's just 1 in a million. You're not gonna see that shot go down that often. Kawhi could take that shot again against the Bucks, and he probably would miss it. I would put my money on him missing that versus hitting that.
I think a smart man would also agree, and that they would also probably bet that shot's not being made again, possibly ever. Rob, you were more angered than anything with this shot, which I think shows a bit of a different perspective. But what was it for you in that final 4 seconds of this basketball game? Would you have changed anything in the defensive state?
Well, you know what? For as much of an obnoxious Sixers hater as L is, he did have a good point in the group chat last night. I think they should have put 2 or maybe even 3 guys on Kawhi Leonard and just completely prevented him from getting the ball altogether. I mean, the rest of that Toronto team, they weren't doing anything. They weren't shooting the ball well or anything really the whole night. I would much rather take the ball out of Kawhi's hands and have some other guy try to beat us. You can't, especially off an inbounds play, you got to keep the ball away from their best player. You can't just let the best player get the ball and have a chance to beat you. So I think that they should have done that differently. As far as the actual defense on the play, though, I mean, you can't play it better than Embiid did. It was just a really lucky shot that Kawhi was able to get over him, and then somehow it hit the outside of the rim and somehow bounced around and went in. So you can't really blame Embiid for that. But I think that they certainly should have defended it differently off the inbounds.
Yeah, I just feel like in that moment, in a game 7, that ball was never going to land in anyone else's hands. And to me, I would not have been able to live with moving that much attention towards even just allowing him to get the basketball off the initial inbound pass there and risking leaving someone open. The way that basketball game went, Marc Gasol doesn't hit shots almost all night, and he gets left open for a 3, with an opportunity to kind of extend the lead and make it at one point seem like, well, shit, this game's probably over now if he's finally hitting that shot. And what does he do? He hits the shot. Serge Ibaka hits a wide open 3 after he couldn't connect all series. Then he hits a contested 3, which is I've never seen from Serge Ibaka before because he's not a freaking shooter. To me, it just felt like the flow of that game was we needed Kawhi Leonard to be short on one more shot. And he was. He just happened to put some insane English on that ball. And it just seems it's bizarre. And Rob, you mentioned it, throughout, I think it was the group text. It was either that or when you and I were texting. It felt like every single ball that could possibly rim out for the 76ers, especially early on in that game, but as the game went on even, it was rimming out. But for Toronto, it felt like, especially in that second half, if it was hitting the rim, it was going in. It was. I've never seen so many friendly rolls, capped off certainly by that final friendly roll of that five doink, which I should probably call. I don't know if my buddy Josh listens to this show or not, but if he does, he's a Bears and a Sixers fan, so his life must blow last night, and he's probably sick to his stomach. Having things clank off iron that often for him, or that near. But for me, I look at it and I say, I'm a realist. I understand that no matter what was going to happen, Kawhi was going to get his hands on the basketball, and people are criticizing, Ben Simmons for not sticking with that. And to me, if two 76ers go up in front of Kawhi Leonard, even if no contact made whatsoever, I don't trust the refs to not blow that whistle for Kawhi because he's commanded that kind of respect. And, I know what state of a series and basketball game that was in a game 7 in the final seconds that, most of the time that call's not going to get made, but it just felt like, how sick would you guys have been if he misses that shot, but Ben Simmons does continue over after Joel cuts him off to take over the coverage there, and Ben gets a foul call on him.
Oh, it's Kawhi Leonard. He's absolutely getting that call. And then the fact that it's Toronto. I mean, Toronto was getting most of the calls throughout the series. So absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that Toronto and Kawhi would have gotten that call there.
I mean, look at it earlier in the game. It was Siakam where they blew the whistle like 2 seconds after the shot goes in. They were getting ready to inbound the ball. And
that was absurd.
They called the foul. Like, why? Because I think did he miss or no he hit? I don't know what happened. Like no, and they just call it. I'm like, how's that a foul? That makes no sense.
It's tough to sit there and I do think that the refs in all sports, not just the NBA, have an incredibly difficult job now as to what they had 20 years ago with social media being what it is, with instant replay being what it is, with what these TVs and how sharp and fine this image is. Their life is just so thankless. Their job is thankless. If they get 3,000 calls right and the 3,001st call goes wrong, that's all they're remembered for. And it is unfortunate, but it is tough, I won't lie, watching a game like that where you see, Joel Embiid, get called for a travel, and it wasn't. He was still in the air when the ball left his hands, and that's 2 points that, Rob, you said if he makes one more shot, well, Joe did make one more shot legally that was then deemed illegal, and they were wrong. That's hard to live with. Ben Simmons was going to the hole, and Kyle Lowry had no position, was still moving, basically tackled him. They called a charge on Ben. Those types of things, that's really hard, as we watch it. both in real speed on a TV and then on constant replay, and then we see it again on Twitter, and we see it again on Facebook, we see it again on Bleacher Report and ESPN. It's just hard to live with. But when I look back down just to again those final 4 seconds of this basketball game, I'm 100% comfortable with how they played those 4 seconds. Sure, ideally Kawhi doesn't get the basketball, but I'm a realist here, and they were going to find a way that Kawhi was going to get that shot. There was no way that wasn't going to happen. And seeing as he was getting that ball anyway, you had your 2 best players, at one point during that 4 seconds on Kawhi, and he just happened to beat them both. And you have to tip your cap, and it's just one of those things. I think the hardest thing, and I think you guys will agree, and it's something that Jimmy Butler had said in his exit interviews, both of them actually. This was a very, very special team, and it was guys that really, really played for each other. They played for their coach, they played for the organization, they played for the city, and they didn't have a lot of time to grow, to know each other on the court or even off the court. And even in that minimal time, they all grew that level of respect and competitive nature, and you could see it. I told you seeing Joe, as emotional as he was, going into the locker room, that's hard to watch. Seeing, as I mentioned earlier, the soul leave Tobias Harris' chest. It looked like someone was just summoning him, and that was it, and his life was over. When that ball clanked back in, it's hard watching those moments, and to know that this team will not be back in exactly the same fashion as it was at the conclusion of Game 7 is really, really hard. I don't know about you guys. There are very few times where I can look at a roster from year to year and after its final game of either the regular season or the postseason and say, damn, I hope almost everyone's back. Well, shit, I hope everyone's back. I know I have my qualms with JJ. I hope he's back. I know that Toby didn't really fit throughout this year. I hope he's back. JJ, we've had ups and downs. I hope to God he is back. I look at even a guy like Mike Scott or Ennis, both of those guys as bench guys. Shit, I hope they're back. I haven't had that experience with a 76ers team in a very long time. So again, we're not going to get into the offseason, but it's going to be a really, really crucial one for the Philadelphia 76ers. We'll give each of us here, 30, 60 seconds. Just give your final thought on the 76ers season as a whole, or just the series, or on any one player, whatever you guys have. We'll start with you, Kev. Again, you are a resident Sixers guy, so we will start with you with your final thought here on the conclusion of this 76ers season.
I thought it was a great season. I thought it was obviously the goal of every season of every contending team is to win win the title, win the NBA championship. But we fell a little short this year. But I think Brett Brown did a great job. His job is fine. He's going to be fine, and I'm looking forward to the future. I'm just hoping next year they can bring back the players they need. I hope we keep Jimmy. I do hope we keep Toby. I think you need more than half a year to develop the chemistry together as a full team to be able to do something. That Raptors team has been together for a while, not counting Marc Gasol. But they, Kyle Lowry, he was there from the start, and I think Danny Green was there too last year. But oh well. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to the future, and I'm hoping next year they can go a little further.
Connor, will roll to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kev. I think it was and even just like you said, it's a special team. It's very few people connect on the level that like people on Twitter and people when just talking about in pass, and like nobody did the feelings that this team brought on was just unlike anything you ever felt with even the Philadelphia Eagles that went on to win the Super Bowl. Just this team was special. There was something about them. Everybody brought their own thing, from TJ McConnell, everyone's favorite personal cheerleader, to Mike Scott, everyone just loved that attitude, that Philly attitude he brought. The way he walked out of his exit interview saying, "I ain't no bitch." Like that's like that's the you gotta love that what this team brought. They all had amazing personalities. I'd love to see a whole bunch of them come back. There's a few I don't want to see back. I mean, Amir Johnson, for example, but there's some most of them I would love to see come back, and I think it's going to be a crazy off season. And for how much I judge Brett Brown, he did a hell of a job in this Raptors series. I never saw the guy make more adjustments and try and make things work to beat a team like he did with the Raptors. And I mean, he did have 7 games to do it, but then there were more adjustments to make. But I mean, to think that there was rumors going around that this might be his job hanging by a thread in a Game 7, like so many people have said, you can't let him go after that. A quadruple 5-time doink possession. You can't fire the guy for that. And yes, he's had his ups and downs, but he has not. I don't think he's had the same roster ever for more than probably half a year. By the time the trade deadline came every year, there was always a change in roster. If you can get most of these guys back next to you and keep it a consistent team and a constant team, I think that there's a good chance that Brett Brown shows that he can take that team to the finals and win the finals. And just the team was so special. The coach is special. The way that they talked about Brett Brown, I think that management and owners would be crazy to think about that, firing him, or to think about letting him move on at all, because someone will pick him up in a heartbeat.
And Rob, your final thoughts here on the 76ers final game of the season. We lose you, Rob. Seems like we lost Rob. For you in there, kid?
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Rob's not. Strange enough. But for...
Hey, you guys got me now?
There we go. Rob, your final thought.
All right, so yeah, I was just going to say I completely agree with what Connor said about Brett Brown, that he had a lot of adjustments that he had to make with new rosters coming in and out throughout the season. He did the best of what he could do with all those changes that were being made, and it really kind of shone through in the playoffs. I thought he did a really good job in the Brooklyn series making adjustments, and I thought he did a good job in the Toronto series as well making adjustments. So I do not pin this loss on him one bit. There are some things that he could have done differently, but minor adjustments. As far as the roster goes, the Sixers have some decisions to make. And they have decisions with Jimmy coming up and with Tobias coming up. I'll talk about them more in our next segment, but I'd love to have both those guys back, but it may not be the best thing for the team. But just talking about this year's team, though, it was so up and down. They finished with 51 wins, which was one below what they had the year before. But as I said, with all the changes that happened and whatnot, there were points in the season where I thought they were going to be the most dominant team in basketball. There were points in the season where I thought they were going to be a first-round exit. There are points in the season where I thought they were just going to be, another average playoff team and end up what they were, a second-round playoff exit. So, in retrospect, it was a good season. It could have been a lot better. It also could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm going to echo here on my final thought is kind of similar to what Connor did. This team was special. It was, and believe me when I say, so, my sports loyalty in the city, it's no secret. I am obviously a Philadelphia Phillies guy first, Flyers and Eagles second, or Flyers, then Eagles, then 76ers. But for whatever reason, this 76ers team was able to bring out a kind of intensity from a fan perspective out of somebody like me who, again, and that's not saying that I'm not invested in this Philadelphia 76ers team. I, like most of you, have not missed a game all year, have not missed a game in the process era, haven't missed a game since prior to that as well. But the emotional attachment that I had to whether or not this team was going to be successful or not, I don't know of a time where it's ever been rivaled by another team. Connor, you mentioned the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and I remember what I felt like watching that game, watching that ball, clank off three different players' hands and fall and hit the turf. I remember that amount of joy. And if I was to magnify, and the pure joy from that moment, and then the utter just awful defeat, and just how low I felt last night after the 76ers lost, I think if you were to look at that on a scales perspective, it would be further tipped in how emotionally attached I was to the loss last night than I was to the win of the Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles. And in some cases, people could sit there and say that I, choosing to exercise my options to actively seek out misery and actively seek out disappointment. And that's not it. This team had its pieces that just drew you in. It was this team embodied the city of Philadelphia more so than any team I can recall in recent history. You look at a guy, Connor mentioned it as well, Mike Scott, who just had that attitude that just, you wanted to like him. You wanted, this is a guy that didn't fit anywhere else in the NBA. He was almost cut. He was a throw-in part of the trade, and he becomes an integral part to the very limited playable players that we had in the playoffs here for the 76ers roster. That's a guy who doesn't survive anywhere other than Philadelphia. And I think that he's a player that, we lift up and he lifts us up, and that's special. You look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, who has had his run-ins at each stop, with each coach, with each set of teammates that he's had, and he comes to Philadelphia, and damn it if you don't see a totally different version, and we'll never know what goes on 100% behind closed doors, but I love Jimmy Butler, man, and what we saw out of him in these playoffs, the city of Philadelphia loves Jimmy Butler. And the way that, Joe, his emotional exit there, walking up the tunnel for the final time this year was just brutal. Brett Brown constantly coaching for his career. That's insane. So much of this was emotional, and it just drew you in a way that so few teams in this city have had the ability to do. So last night hurt. Last night was one of those just sit and stare blankly at the TV and continue to repeat to yourself, did this really happen? Is that ball still bouncing on the rim? And it's one that's not easily forgotten. And in today's world, you guys have each mentioned this is going to be a highlight for decades to come, and it's tough. But Rob, you mentioned it. We have, or Rob and Kev both mentioned it. We have a big off season and some decisions to make. But we will get into that at a later episode of TJ's One of Us. But for now, we are going to sign off unless you guys have any other final thoughts. Kev, anything you want to add? Connor, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think we hit it as much as we can with raw emotion tonight.
Like I said, a little more of a free speak on this one. Wasn't as much structure, but in an emotional game like that, I feel like this is what it called for. Rob, your final thoughts, sir?
The moment that ball went in the net, the Sixers need to remember how they felt then, and they need to remember that moment to piss them off going into next season. Extra motivation.
Agreed. And Kev, it looks like we got you back here. You have a final thought?
Yeah, no, basically what I was thinking the same thing that Rob said. Just, I think Rob even tweeted it. It's just, you have to take that emotion, you have to take that understanding what loss really is. And, you learn more from losing than you do from winning. So I guarantee that they'll, if they make the right adjustments in the off season, if they bring back the right people, we'll be back next year. We'll be even further. We'll make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, if anything, and I'm looking forward to it.
As am I, and as is the rest of the city of Philadelphia. For the last time during an active season here for the 76ers and here for TJ's One of Us, we will be signing off. And when we come back next week, it will be off-season talk and talks about the coach and all different types of topics and debatable things that that we've had throughout this entire season. But for the last time here during the active season, That'll be it, and we'll let the Jackdaws kind of carry us out here. Which, by the way, follow them on Instagram. It is the Jackdaws. It's JACKDAWS. You can follow them on Instagram or their website, www.jackdaws.com. That'll be it for the Always Next Year podcast here with TJ's One of Us.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever fight me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
This has been a production of the Always Next Year Podcast Network. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Spreaker, and SoundCloud. Please also remember to rate and review this podcast to validate our members' life choices. We appreciate it. This is ANYP, signing off.